we'd like to move on to an equally alarming topic. We'd like to welcome Anna Dowsett Johnston, author of Drink, The Intimate Relationship Between Women and Alcohol. So welcome, Anne. Hello. Thanks for joining us today to weigh in on female alcohol addiction. Hi, Anne. Now, in your book, Drink, you discuss the alcohol abuse gender gap closing, citing some pretty shocking statistics. So what exactly prompted you to research and write about this issue? Oh, and I think we're having some sound issues. Can you guys hear Anne?
There I am. Oh, there she is.
There she is. Hi, Anne. Now I can hear you.
I was prompted to write this book because I was the daughter of a cross-addicted alcoholic mother and suffered a lot as a child from alcoholism, and it was the one thing I was determined never to do, fall down the bunny hole of alcoholism myself, and in my 50s I did. I was a very different alcoholic than my mother. I was high-functioning professional alcoholic who had a major job, and I experienced a very tough 17 months and took myself to rehab.
And I shared that with you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good, good, good. Yeah, I just celebrated 13 years of sobriety on Tuesday. And did it through rehab. But I was a very different alcoholic than you because I was very low functioning, and in fact am astounded at people like you that can have a problem with alcoholism and still be making your way in the world and functioning. I find this to be a fascinating topic. I'm wondering if it's so new that women are drinking, or is this just something that we're now discussing?
Well, that's a really good question. What's happening now is that we're seeing a closing gender gap in terms of women and drinking. We are catching up to men, and that is a brand new story. Men are flattening out or plateauing in terms of risky drinking. Women are going through the roof, and they're not slowing down in their 20s. They're not slowing down in their 30s, their 40s, or their 50s. And we're seeing very high functioning professional women getting into trouble. So the low bottom story we've known for a long time. But the high bottom story, no, not at all. That is a new picture, and these women are not slowing down when they're pregnant, and that's disturbing. What we're seeing, I think, is three things. Women drink because they're entitled to. Women drink because they are medicating depression, and we are 40% more likely to suffer from depression. And women are drinking because it's the modern woman's steroid. It's a way to juggle being a high-functioning mom, a high-functioning professional who's told that they have to be perfect at home, perfect at work, perfectly thin, perfect at everything. And it's not uncommon to come home and pour yourself a glass of wine while you chop the vegetables and oversee homework. This is a very, very common picture.
You know, the other thing that I think is interesting is that women metabolize alcohol differently than men. It actually affects us more. Less alcohol affects us more than men. Do you think that's a big factor?
So different. I think what's interesting is that while we had an adult conversation about trans fats and tanning beds, we haven't had an adult conversation, an open conversation about our favorite drug. We are really unaware of the fact that 15% of breast cancer cases are connected to alcohol consumption. We're unaware that it isn't good for our heart. We tend to think of a glass of red wine sort of like vitamin D, something good for your health. That isn't the case, and that hasn't been the case for some time. Democratically, we're equal, but metabolically and hormonally, we're very different from men when it comes to alcohol. And yet, if it hit campuses, university campuses, young men and women are playing drinking games. He's drinking beer. She's drinking shots, tequila or vodka. She's 2/3 his size. She probably hasn't eaten, and it's not an equal opportunity sport. Addiction counselors are noticing an enormous number of older women coming for rehab treatment, just like I did. And they're noticing that younger women we're seeing a huge upsurge in drunkorexia, which is a combination of eating disorders and alcohol problems. That's very, very common in sort of the university years. So, Anna, you're back with us. Oh, you're muted.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I'm back. I didn't hear your answer, but you don't have to re-answer it for me if you already said it.
What was your question?
Oh, my question is about the time of month, how hormones impact relapse rates. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't. That's a really good question, but I will tell you that menopause played a huge role in my drinking issues. I suffered terrible depression in menopause, and I drank to medicate my depression. No doubt about it. It was the easiest way to self-medicate.
Yeah. I'm curious about the recovery. What do you do to maintain sobriety now?
I'm 5 years sober as of last week, which I'm just thrilled about. I attend meetings on a regular basis. I practice a lot of self-care. I have totally changed my life. Was a workaholic. I'm no longer a workaholic. I'm a writer instead of a person who shows up at a job where I was earning an extraordinary amount of money, but was vice principal of McGill University and had 190 employees, under me, and it was a complex world. So I treat my life very, very differently, and my relationships are very, very strong and central to my life. So there you go. It's a really important, I think, for women to have a look at what their weekly consumption is and make sure they don't fall down the bunny hole that we do. And a weekly consumption that's safe is 10 drinks, no more.
Do you think that there's something women can do if they feel themselves slipping into alcoholism to prevent it? Or do you believe, I sort of believe, there's nothing you can do. If you're an alcoholic, there's no amount of limits you can set or things you can do to prevent it from happening.
We all play the game of, the drinking diaries where you promise yourself that you won't have a drink that day and you have to, or you say, no more vodka, I will only drink wine. New rules, and that is a classic slipping into alcoholism. If you are finding that you make a promise and you can't keep the promise, as in I won't drink tonight, and you do, you'll probably have a trouble. The other big thing you need to ask yourself is, are you drinking to numb feelings of anxiety and depression or stress, or are you drinking just to relax? And there's a very, very big difference. If you're drinking to numb or self-medicate, you really need to think about whether you should be drinking at all. I feel that quite strongly.
Yeah, I agree. Did anybody else want to jump in? I feel like I'm being way too dominant here.
No, not at all, but I actually did have one last question for you. There was an article in Slate recently that was very controversial about young women binge drinking in college and that really increasing their chances of sexual assault. How do you feel like that ties into everything you're talking about? How do you feel about it?
I feel that we've known for a long time that alcohol is the #1 date rape drug. No matter how you express it, women have to be very careful with their drinking, and they have to be aware that it puts them at a disadvantage. And it's very important that young women know that. We've seen on Facebook outings what's happened to young women, and it hasn't been pretty in the last year. So we've seen.
I do think parents need to be responsible and not turned up. Like, they need to know that their kids are probably drinking, and be aware of the realities of that too, and be honest and open with their kids about it.
Yes, I agree.
That's a big problem. I think parents don't want to believe that it's happening.
But at the same time, there's not that much a parent can do. I mean, take it from my parents who tried. Your kid cannot be controlled.
Yeah.
And I have heard of every way of doing it. Tell them all about your alcoholism. Tell them all about the dangers. Don't tell them. Let them. Don't let them. And there's really nothing you can do, I believe. Anne, do you agree?
Well, I think we have to take ownership of the fact that our drinking affects our sons and daughters. We think that, our modeling doesn't matter. Our modeling matters terribly. And open conversations really matter as well. If anything is a strength, I think, in this generation, I've met parents who say, well, there's no point. I can't say anything. He's not going to listen to me anyhow. Never underestimate the power of an open conversation. I think that we need to really accept that.
Yeah, I mean, I really did feel comfortable. I did call my parents in high school. when I was, like, I felt comfortable. I had that kind of relationship. And I will do that with, the first time I threw up from drinking, I woke my mother up, and she helped me. Right. And she said, you know what, I'm not going to yell at you. My mother did this with me. And she goes, you don't want to do, and I, you know, I felt there, you learn the lesson. I felt this. I would call her if I was, if I want to do that with my. I don't know. I just, I think that there is something you can do.
Of course you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think trying to prevent your kids from being traumatized is the best thing, because there is a huge link between trauma and addiction. So to give your child the happiest, healthiest life they can have is the best antidote against alcoholism that exists.
Right.